Thank you. All right. I feel a little lost without a whiteboard behind me. I want to write things down to illustrate what I'm saying, but I have to go with the slides. So I'm really going to be talking to the young people in the room because old people get talked to all the time. In fact, there used to be this whole T-shirt campaign that said, "Don't trust anyone over 30." So I'm going to ask that for this case, you trust me on this. What really is the difference between young people and adults? Hold on. Okay. How to manage adults in 4 easy steps. What is the difference between young people and adults? Is it bank accounts, the ability to vote, driver's license, wisdom, life experience, height? I don't think that adults are necessarily smarter than kids, and I can imagine children doing a much better job voting than we have done recently. And right now I'm taller than many of you, but the older I get, the less likely that is to stay true. Now, what the difference is between you and I, between young people and old people, adults, I don't want to say everyone's old, is that society trusts us with agency. Agency is defined as the condition, the state of exerting power. Specifically, the idea that you can exert power over your own condition. As adults, we don't do a very good job trusting young people with agency. And as young people, you don't do a good job of taking it. So when I say that there are 4 easy steps to managing the adults in your life, I'm really saying there are 4 easy steps to taking back or reclaiming your agency. I'm a teacher. I like it. It's fun. I get to be the center of attention all the time. But one thing that frustrates me is that the people who make the laws in the country about teachers are almost never teachers. They tell me that I have to do this or that, or that we need to try and get these outcomes in the classroom, and they've never been in the classroom. And I say, how can you tell me what to do when you don't know what it is I actually do? My goals are not your goals. My priorities are not your priorities. And if I were a kid, if I were a young person, I would say that same thing. I would say, hold on, wait, just hold on. You're talking about the environment and healthcare and education and the budget and gerrymandering and all of these things. But honestly, you're going to be dead when we have to deal with them. I am the one who is going to have to deal with all of these. Your goals are not my goals. Your priorities are not my priorities. Your beliefs are not my beliefs. But your actions will lead to my consequences. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that young people are going to be given the chance to hold office anytime soon. So you're not going to be able to manage the country as possibly you should because you'll be the inheritors of that country. So the best thing you can do is learn to manage the adults around you. And if you follow these 4 easy steps, you're not going to be able to force them to fulfill your own nefarious desires every single time. But over time, eventually, if you internalize these steps, you will find those grown-ups listening to what you have to say, ignoring you, if preferable, and generally thinking about whatever it is you have to suggest and giving it that second thought. So the first step I have to say to you is ask big questions. At my school, we have this thing called growth mindset. We talk about it a lot. It's awesome. Growth mindset is the approach to life that says it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to make a mistake. And in fact, whenever we make mistakes, and whenever we succeed because of or despite those mistakes, or come up with new solutions to those mistakes, that is when our brain does its best developing. But this is hard to get our minds around because from a very young age, we are told, don't make mistakes. Don't get anything wrong. Don't stand out. If we don't know the answer, we are made to feel like a failure. as a student, as a human being, and so we don't want to ever reach our hand up and risk looking dumb. But I have something to tell you about looking dumb. It's totally underrated. I've made a bit of a career of looking dumb. If you notice this tie and checkered shirt combination, that's just one of the most subtle, dumb-looking things I've done today. I think the other is to keep wrapping up this cord. I'm going to let that go. The other thing is that almost everybody forgets that you looked dumb. And in fact, later on, it gives you far more interesting stories. Far more interesting, time. So when you have that question, when you don't know what to say or you don't know what to think, ask. Because it does a couple of other things. One, you'll learn something shocking. If you don't ask, you're never going to learn. And secondly, it's like giving us a treat. It makes us feel good. They're like good adult. It's like throwing them a cookie and patting them on the head. And they're like, yeah, that's a smart kid. They asked me a question and listened to what I had to say. So next time you actually have a desire, you think of it as an investment. They're going to be like, oh, that kid totally asked me really great questions. Of course you can have an extension on your homework. You build up this habit of trust with the adults because they see you thinking. The next step is don't ask questions. But wait, you said ask questions. I know I said ask questions. And there are questions. There are, questions that push us to think, that make us ask, what is our place in the world? And then there are, questions. These are the questions you can answer for yourself, or really you shouldn't ask in public. Some of my favorite. Should I put my coat on? Well, I guess frostbite is an option if you would like to. Should I write my name on it? No, I just decided to type name with a line after it at the very top of the page just for fun. No, you have to put my name on it. Put somebody else's name on it. Anyway, of course. What are we doing? Parents know this one. But the problem is when people say, what are we doing? It is generally while I'm in the midst of giving instructions. Or, please what are we doing? Put your name on it. It's either in the middle of giving instructions or immediately afterwards. Like 30 seconds. Like really, immediately, like I just finished speaking. And the last one that really gets to me, is this right? Or is it good enough? Can you look at how I'm doing so far? I hate that question. I hate it. You know what I say? I don't know. Is it right? It's a total teacher thing. I don't know. Is it good enough? I don't know. Can I look at how you're doing so far? The problem with these questions is they tell me a couple of things generally. One is that you didn't read, or you didn't listen, or in a broader sense, you're not willing to make a decision for yourself. And the problem with that is when you refuse to make a decision for yourself, you are training us, the adults, to make those decisions for you. You are giving up your agency. But it is that last question, is this right? Am I good enough? That really gets to me. Because we're not willing to assess for ourselves. And there is so much fear in that question. Fear that I might get it wrong. So this leads me directly to the next step. Oh, that was a good picture. I should have clicked it earlier. Take a risk. Every adult, your parents, your teachers, random adults on the street, spend their lives wrapping you in bubble wrap, as they should. But there comes a point where you need to come out from under their arms and take a risk. The best assignments I have ever received from students were the product of taking a risk. They didn't say, hey, is this good enough? They didn't say, am I following the instructions? No, they just did the assignment knowing that if they failed, they did so gloriously and had fun doing it. They entered, as Teddy Roosevelt would say, the arena. Now, I am a social studies teacher, so if you thought you were going to get away with this without some story about Teddy Roosevelt, well, too bad. Teddy Roosevelt failed at a couple of things. He was such a bad rancher that literally all of his cattle froze to death. Like thousands of dollars of cattle just freezing. It was a horrible winter in Wyoming, but still. He did not succeed as a father. He gave up his oldest daughter to be raised by his sister immediately after she was born. He did not completely cleanse the New York State Assembly in Albany of all the corruption, but he tried. However, he was unwilling to not try. He never said, well, this might be too hard. He said, it is not the critic who counts. It is not the person who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends themselves in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and this is my favorite part, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly. So at their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Did you know he once held the record for 70 years for the most handshakes in a morning? 8,513. Whoops. I know, he used to stand up and shake everybody's hand. New Year's, 1907. All right, so history teacher part aside. I've always said it is better to fail spectacularly than barely win. And so I exhort you at this point in your life, young people, do not content yourself with small, safe victories. Instead, challenge yourself for those glorious defeats that lead to even more spectacular wins. And finally, number 4. What happens on the playground stays on the playground. Please stop telling us things. Stop. Just stop. And it's not unreasonable. We do spend our time raising you to trust adults, which you should. If you are sad or upset or somebody is picking on you or you need help, trust us. Come to us. Absolutely. But there are things you need to stop telling us, and that is hard because we live in a world where the public space exists so vastly. This digital public space of Instagram and Snap, not Snapchat, but Snap, Facebook and Twitter. We want to share everything we do with everyone around us. But sometimes boundaries are good because you as young people will do stupid things, and we as adults will bust you for them, and if we don't, then we're actually not doing our job. So I have a couple of examples of times when perhaps kids should not have spoken, or chose not to speak, and in fact, were quite successful as a result. Number 1. This happens so often. Steinberg, someone comes into my classroom, I didn't do my homework. And I always say the exact same thing. And if you asked any of my students, they would tell you exactly what I say. And I would say, why are you telling me this? Because now that you've told me this, I have to mark down that you haven't done your homework when there is a completely reasonable chance that I would have forgotten completely. That I assigned it, that I needed to collect it, what we were talking about. Barring that, and you need to understand, this is not, classes started. This is 2 or 3 hours before classes started. Barring that, there are two other options. I continue saying this. I would say, in the next, 2.5 hours before we have class, do your homework. And barring that, worst case scenario, as class begins, distract me, which is really easy to do, and quickly copy your friend's homework. Now, I need to say, caveat here, one person's problem solving is another person's cheating. So if you choose to pursue that avenue, know which teachers you are, know which teachers to target that at. Because while some may respect your quick problem-solving ability, others will write you up. And that's on you, because part of agency is actually taking responsibility for whatever it is you do. The second great example of not telling adults too much happened when I was 20 years old. I was a counselor at a summer camp. I was in charge of a dozen boys between the grades of 9th and 10. So they were about 14 years old. And I'm not going to tell you what they did. Maybe privately. But I come out of my tent one day, and we lived in tents in the woods, and I look down. In front of me, there's a Ziploc bag full of candy. Oh, that's so nice. And on that bag is a distinctly anti-authoritarian statement written in Sharpie. I find out that all of the tents in what was called the village, where all of the 9th and 10th graders lived, had equally received this bounty of candy, but mine was the only staff tent. And I come out, and immediately the boys are like, Chaim, guess what we did? I'm like, stop! Don't talk. I don't want to know, because I know that whatever it is you tell me, I'm actually going to make the responsible decision. So don't tell me now. Tell me on final night. They told me on final night, and needless to say, it was one of those camp adventures that really only happens in movies. None of those boys were welcome back to camp the next summer, but it was epic. The last example of a time where a student did not tell the adult too much was a student of mine who once said at the end of the school year, I think I spent more time out of the dress code than in the dress code this year. She had never called attention to herself or publicized the fact or been like, hey, notice anything wrong with my uniform? Which other kids have done. No, instead this student just cruised along, didn't make waves, till the end of the year when I realized I really need to pay more attention to what the dress code says. So what does all of this have to do with improving the experience of young people? At the end of the day, the person you can most rely on to advocate for you is you. Adults will think that you are too young, you are too inexperienced, that you just don't get it, until you prove them wrong. My job is to teach you. It is to take care of you. It is to make sure that you don't die. Your job is to prove to me that you have learned something, that you can take care of yourself, and if released into the wild, you can cross the street safely. The only person who can give you agency is you. And until you learn to not manipulate, until you can learn to manage the grown-ups in your life, until you learn to reclaim that agency, you are never going to grow up. And adults, that goes for you too, but that's a whole other talk altogether. Thank you.